From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, this is Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Palestinian mother of 6 shot dead by Israeli military. U.S. holds press conference with India's top diplomat on Ukraine. U.S. supports Pakistan's constitutional democratic principles. Commemoration held for 1995 Srebrenica Massacre in Sarajevo. New study finds Trump support led to more prejudice in U.S. 16 are injured in New York City subway shooting. And our top story tonight. Israeli soldiers killed a Palestinian woman in the West Bank city of Bethlehem on Sunday, the health ministry reported. Ghada Ibrahim Sabatin, a mother of 6 in her 40s, was shot by Israeli forces and died from her wounds. Eyewitnesses reported Israeli soldiers opened fire on the woman while she was walking near Hasan village, west of Bethlehem. She was rushed to the hospital where she died of her injury. The Israeli army did not comment on their killing of Sabatin. The murder took place in the West Bank town of Jenin, where Israeli soldiers are conducting raids. About 14 Palestinians and 14 Israelis have been killed in attacks since March 22nd. In related news, on Monday, Turkey condemned the Israeli army's killing of Ghada Sabatin. The foreign ministry called on Israeli authorities to investigate the incident impartially and thoroughly. It also urged Israel to take the necessary measures to prevent the reoccurrence of such an inhumane action. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says democracies should stand together to face Russian President Vladimir Putin. He spoke during a joint press conference with Indian Foreign Minister Srebrenica Jaishankar. Jaishankar claims Europe buys more energy from Russia than India. Journalist Mehdi Hasan asked why the U.S. President Joe Biden called Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal while arming Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen. On Sunday, Hasan questioned a U.S. State Department official about why the president failed to criticize Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He asked the ambassador why the U.S. government isn't calling out war crimes in Yemen like it is in Ukraine. Hasan said multiple atrocities have been documented by both sides, of which one is a U.S. ally, Saudi Arabia. Beth Van Schaak, U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice, said that the U.S. has diminished its support of the Saudi-led campaign in Yemen. On Monday, the United States voiced support for Pakistan's peaceful upholding of constitutional democratic principles. This was after the country's new prime minister took office. Shehbaz Sharif was sworn in after former Premier Imran Khan was ousted in a no-confidence vote. Khan attempted to thwart the vote and maintained that he was the victim of a U.S. plot to remove him. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said Washington does not support one political party over another. Sharif is the younger brother of the 3-time former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. There are several corruption charges pending against both brothers. Sharif was selected by combined opposition, which secured 174 votes in Pakistan's 342-member National Assembly. Tens of thousands of people came out onto the streets in support of Imran Khan. Amnesty International has called on Tunisian authorities to drop politicized investigations of lawmakers. On Friday, a Tunisian military court sentenced Abdul Latif Al-Alawi to 3 months in prison. Heba Morayev, Amnesty's regional director for the Middle East and North Africa, said Tunisian authorities must end the political persecution of members of parliament. She urged the country to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill their rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and association. The London-based rights group said at least 20 members of parliament who protested President Kais Saied's power grab are facing criminal charges. Saied denounced the session as a failed coup attempt and dissolved the parliament. On Monday, Indonesians took to the streets to protest the rapidly rising cost of living and the possibility of extending the president's term in office. People gathered in the capital, Jakarta, to complain about the rising cost of goods and allegations that the government may postpone the 2024 presidential election. Demonstrators shouted slogans against extending President Joko Widodo's tenure either by changing the constitution or delaying the election. They stressed that the main problem in the country is the economy and demanded a solution to rising food and fuel prices. On Monday, a group of women from Srebrenica attended a peaceful demonstration in front of the Heart of Jesus Cathedral and a statue of Pope John Paul II. The rally was held in Bosnia and Herzegovina's capital, Sarajevo. It was a commemoration of the 1995 massacre in the eastern Bosnian town Srebrenica. More than 8,000 Muslim men and boys were executed in the killing spree after Bosnian Serb forces overran the town. Monday's demonstration was held by various women's associations, the Islamic Union, Sarajevo Mufti, and the Sarajevo Mufti Social Assistance Department. Somalia's first woman-run radio and television station has opened in the capital, Mogadishu. UN-backed Bazelon Media will produce content aiming at addressing issues affecting women and women's rights in the East African nation. The station's launch marked a leap in efforts to secure women's place in Somalia's public sector. Bazelon means bright and clear in the Somali language. The all-female station hopes to break barriers and highlight issues such as rape, sexual assault, and women's medical concerns. Fatih Mohammed Ahmed is Bazelon's deputy editor. She said the station's mission is to showcase the productivity and power of women. Bringing domestic news stories after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you and you could be me for just 1 hour, if we could find a way to get inside each other's minds, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Friends, our world is pulling together like never before. We're making huge sacrifices to keep one another safe. Scientists are working non-stop to develop COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. A vaccine will get our economies moving. It will tell our loved ones we're safe again. But we have challenges we must address. Right now, huge pharmaceutical companies are keeping the vaccine research a secret. They're deciding how many vaccines get made, how much to charge for them, and who gets vaccinated. This will no doubt leave billions of people behind. Pharma companies are putting profit, not people, first. Yet, billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is funding their work. We cannot let the CEOs of a handful of pharmaceutical companies decide our future. We need a vaccine that everyone can have free of charge, no matter where you live or whether you're rich or you're poor. We need companies to share all their research so we can make enough safe vaccines for everyone. We need a vaccine owned by all of us. To end this COVID-19 pandemic, we need to pull together once more.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks, racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime? And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
"16 people have been injured after a shooting in a New York City subway station today. They include 10 who sustained wounds from gunfire and 5 in critical condition. Undetonated devices were also found at the station. Authorities said an investigation is underway and told residents to avoid the area of 36th Street and the 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. Officials say that the incident is not being investigated as an act of terrorism. The suspect is still at large. On Monday, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a final rule to curb the proliferation of ghost guns. It's part of the Biden administration's comprehensive strategy to prevent and respond to gun crime. Law enforcement agencies have increasingly recovered such guns from crime scenes. Ghost guns lack serial numbers and can be bought online or at a store and assembled in under 30 minutes at home. They're widely available in forms of kits that can be bought without background checks. Federal law now requires such kits to bear serial numbers and commercial sellers to obtain a federal license and run background checks before a sale. Last May, the Justice Department proposed updating the definition of a firearm to include ghost guns. A U.S. federal judge will sentence 2 Illinois men today who bombed a Bloomington, Minnesota mosque in 2017 and helped convict their militia leader for the attack. Michael McWhorter and Joe Morris face mandatory minimum sentences of 35 years in prison after pleading guilty to a series of federal felonies. Along with the mosque bombing, they admit to robbing a Walmart, home invasions, extortions, and attempting to firebomb a woman's health clinic in Champaign, Illinois. The duo's attorneys asked U.S. District Judge Donovan Frank for 10-year sentences. That's in exchange for their testimony against Emily Claire Hari. She's the criminal mastermind who was sentenced to 53 years in prison last year for bombing Dar al-Farouk Mosque in Bloomington, Minnesota. According to prosecutors, the leadership for Dar al-Farouk is also advocating for a reduced sentence for McWhorter and Morris. Minnesota's U.S. Attorney's Office said both Morris and McWhorter, have expressed remorse for their participation in the bombing and have accepted responsibility for their actions. It added that the government acknowledges and greatly respects Dar al-Farouq's ability to forgive their attackers and to use this act of terrorism as a platform to promote mercy. 13 studies with more than 10,000 participants measured the change in Americans' prejudice after the presidency of Donald Trump. Researchers found explicit racial and religious prejudice increased amongst Trump supporters, while prejudice decreased amongst those who opposed him. The research was published in Nature Human Behavior, a monthly journal, in late February this year. There has been a downward trend in prejudice towards racial and religious minorities in the U.S. in recent years. But a number of studies suggest racial and religious prejudice played a critical role in Trump's presidential victory. Some commentators suggested numerous trends after the 2016 elections included increases in reported hate crimes and discrimination against minorities. Others argued that the increases may be due to greater national attention on issues of prejudice. A conservative watchdog group is suing Voice of America for not responding to Freedom of Information Act request about its alleged pro-Islamic bias. The Washington, D.C.-based American Accountability Foundation, or AAF, is investigating allegations that VOA was amplifying anti-American and pro-Islamist reporting in Iran. The AAF is accused of targeting Iranians in the region and Iranian Americans. Voice of America is an independent arm of the U.S. government, funded by taxpayers. The international radio broadcaster is operated by the United States Agency for Global Media. It provides news and information in 47 languages, including Persian in Iran. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid in Chicago. Just like you, I was moved by that Allahu Akbar lady. She stood her ground, fearful of none, for her hijab and for her education. Sisters and brothers, Indian Muslims are facing a genocide. India does not care for Muslim protesting, but it does care for the world opinion. Therefore, we must push the United Nations. The UN has a responsibility to protect. They must prevent genocide. Please sign this UN petition now. Get others to sign. It will help. Trust me, it will help. We need 1 million signatures, brothers and sisters. Please sign now.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch.
Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3.
okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. In one of our analysis segments, we talked about the issue of gun violence in the United States. Let's watch.
President Biden and the Secretary of Justice together visited New York and to deal and discuss strategies to fight gun violence. New York Mayor, who used to be a NYPD, New York's police department's captain, he joined them and he agreed with the president. Actually, he said, Mr. President, Eric Adams is reporting for duty and ready to serve. So what can he do? Can we stop the gun violence? It's a part of Americana. Will it be possible? And what are the things he could do? We have someone who studies these things, a professor of law and the director of criminal juvenile justice and racial justice clinical program at the University of San Francisco School of Law, Professor Lara Bazelon. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us what these people can do. I mean, it seems that the mayor and the Secretary of Justice, as well as president, are together on this.
Well, they have their work cut out for them for a number of reasons. As you know, gun rights have expanded in the United States with this conservative majority in the Supreme Court, and they seem poised to strike down some laws that had allowed states like New York to have tighter gun restrictions. What they're saying they're going to do, the Biden-Adams partnership, is crack down on something called the Iron Corridor. And that is actually the I-95 freeway, which runs north to south and is basically accused of being a conduit for illegal firearms coming into states like New York and Massachusetts from states in the South, which have more permissive regulations, or some would say lack of regulations around firearms. So that's one thing they're trying to do. Another thing they're trying to do is pump more money into police departments, state, local, and federal. But I think critics on the left would say that the police already have plenty of money. And as you point out, this gun problem seems to be getting worse, not better. And in part, that's because in the United States, there are more guns than there are people. And the laws around gun ownership are getting more permissive rather than more restrictive.
Well, that was interesting to note that President Biden wanted to throw $500 million at it. Was the absence of money the real problem, which he's trying to fix by providing more money?
I don't think so, honestly. I think that the idea that throwing money at this problem is going to fix it is really not very well grounded, because as you probably are aware, law enforcement in the United States is not lacking for money. The problem isn't that their budgets aren't full. The problem is that the laws that exist allow most Americans to own a firearm, in fact, multiple firearms. And because of the kind of commerce of guns and the number of guns, it's also very easy for the people who aren't supposed to have them to get their hands on them.
What President Biden, I mean, he has been president for a year now. What has he done in reference to gun violence, which he will plan to do now?
Well, he has talked a lot about how it's a major problem. Of course, President Obama did the same, and numerous presidents before them have. And really, basically, as far as I can tell, it is a lot of talk. I'm not really sure that he's been able to put some kind of a federal program in place or really encourage super innovative thinking by states and localities around this issue. I mean, one area where there has been progress is the so-called ghost guns and trying to crack down on the people who manufacture them and prosecute those people because, of course, those guns are not legal. But I think that there's just a greater problem, which is partly about our laws and partly about our culture.
Would you think the culture is dictating laws here?
I'm sorry?
Do you think culture is dictating laws?
I think it's a chicken and the egg kind of issue. I think Americans have always loved their guns. I think until recently, there wasn't a lot of case law interpreting the so-called right to bear arms in the Second Amendment. We have a court now, the Supreme Court, that is inclined to interpret that very, very permissively and really to discourage states from trying to impose restrictions like requiring people to have a license or requiring people to not carry guns within a certain number of feet of a certain kind of place. You know, we have states where people are bringing guns to church, they're bringing guns to school, they're bringing guns to the supermarket, they're bringing guns to bars. And in a lot of states, that's perfectly legal. And I don't see our government being able to really do anything about that.
President is also calling on a ban on assault weapons. Is that a statement or is that a strategy which has not been talked about before?
Well, as your listeners may or may not know, we did have a federal ban on assault weapons, and that was put into place in the 1990s. And then it sunsetted that provision, and Congress didn't take that legislation up again. And so we're now in a situation where there really isn't any federal legislation around this question. I think many, many people would welcome a ban on assault weapons, since it's not really clear to me what a regular citizen needs out of an assault weapon. And of course, they're extremely lethal and dangerous. But I think that's really about getting the votes in Congress to revive that bill. And given the power of the gun lobby and given the sentiment in this country toward gun ownership, I'm not sure that there's the political will or the votes to do that.
Well, there were votes and political votes and all that during the Obama administration. He had the House and the Senate and himself as president. They didn't do much in terms of gun laws. So what is the problem with us?
The basic problem is a resistance to changing the law. And it's really interesting because President Obama's best chance to tighten gun restrictions came after the horrible massacre at Sandy Hook, where 20 children were murdered by a deranged gunman. And that was really this big opportunity to at least have background checks be beefed up, to have certain kinds of gun manufacturers be subject to stricter regulations. And actually, you know, it's interesting that legislation polled very, very well. I mean, it was like at a 90% approval rate by the public. And yet, because the gun lobby was so powerful, and I think they have a hold over many of our elected officials, that bill never made it to the floor, much less passed into law. And I feel like if we can't do anything in the wake of our own children being massacred in kindergarten and first grade, I'm not really sure what the prognosis is other than grim.
You know, you as a professor study that and you teach that. So can you and your students come up with some solution to this nightmare?
That's a great question. I feel like one of the things that keeps me engaged with my job is hoping for a better future for my students. I'm not sure we've handed them such a great situation in so many ways. And yet I feel that my students are idealistic and optimistic and energetic. And also, I mean, in California, where I live and I work and I teach, we do have relatively restrictive gun laws. Now we'll see what the Supreme Court does with a case that's pending in New York that would have a huge impact on us. But I do think sometimes when I feel despairing, I look at my state, and you can say what you want about some problems with California, wildfires, droughts, a potential earthquake at any moment, but we are trying our best to do innovative things when it comes to things like criminal justice reform. And so when I think about my students going out into the world and going to states like mine and other states and spreading those ideas, it does make me feel a little more hopeful.
Now, Eric Adams, mayor of New York, where President and the Secretary of Justice joined him, He clearly wanted more policing when he was running for office, unlike other candidates, and it's not considered quote unquote progressive. Do you think his background being a police officer, he can make anything to make New York City safer with less guns and less violence?
I think he has a real mandate from the voters, and he's a really interesting combination of qualities in that, he's a former NYPD officer, but he's also somebody who was racially profiled and actually beaten by the police. He strongly identifies as a Democrat, but he doesn't want to get pulled too far to the left. And I feel like given all of those interesting mixture of qualities and attributes, he has kind of a bully pulpit right now, especially in the honeymoon phase of taking over as mayor of New York. And so it may be that he's able to do some things both at the state level and advocating nationwide as the mayor of one of the most prominent cities. I feel like the jury is out, though, because, he's so new to this office. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, if a mayor of New York can do a few things, what about the executive orders presidents have? Are there some executive orders which could be crafted in a way that, there's more peace on our streets?
That's an interesting question. You're absolutely right that presidents in our country can exercise authority through executive orders. What's tricky here is that, of course, they're checked. They're checked by the Constitution. And right now we have a court that is interpreting the Second Amendment, specifically around the right to bear arms and own guns, in a way that were President Biden to issue an executive order, he'd have to be careful not to run afoul of.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Bazelon, for your time and for your insight.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.